The reunion that came too late. Eleanor Hayes closed the last box with trembling hands, her wrinkled fingers struggling against the packing tape that seemed to resist as much as her heart did to leaving behind that house. At 78 years old, every object she packed away was a memory that hurt to let go. The move to her daughter's home had been inevitable after her last fall, but that didn't make it any less painful to abandon the place where she had built an entire life. That's when she saw it. Between the yellowed pages of her old cookbook, the edge of an envelope peeked out, making her heart stop completely. The elegant, familiar handwriting instantly transported her through time. James Whittaker. That name that had lived silently in the deepest corners of her soul for more than 50 years. Her hands trembled as she held the unopened letter, and her voice broke in a whisper that filled the empty room. James Whittaker. It's been more than 50 years, and I still remember your smile as if it were yesterday. Hello. Before continuing with this story that will change everything you believed about true love and lost opportunities, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It excites me to know that these words reach hearts in different places around the world. Now yes, let's return to Eleanor and a love that time could never erase. The letter weighed like lead between her fingers, but Eleanor didn't dare open it yet. Instead, she closed her eyes and let memory take her back to that summer of 1962. When she was barely 20 years old and the entire world seemed to be waiting for her to conquer it. The summer that changed everything. Eleanor worked as a librarian in the small town of Willow Creek, a place where everyone knew each other and secrets lasted barely an afternoon. The library was her refuge, a silent sanctuary where she could lose herself among the pages of romantic novels that made her dream of adventures that seemed impossible for a girl like her. It was a Tuesday afternoon when he first appeared, tall, with brown hair tousled by the wind and green eyes that seemed to hold fascinating secrets. He wore a worn leather jacket and a shy smile that made Eleanor feel butterflies in her stomach for the first time in her life. "My name is James Whittaker," he said with a soft but confident voice, extending a hand that Eleanor noticed was slightly calloused. "I'm the new pianist at the church. I was told I could find classical sheet music here." Eleanor blushed to the roots of her blonde hair, but managed to show him the music section. What she didn't expect was for James to return the next day, and then the next, until his visits became the most anticipated part of each day. At first, he pretended to look for books, but Eleanor soon realized that his eyes followed her as she organized the shelves or helped other readers. Their conversations began shyly, limited to book recommendations and comments about the weather, but gradually became deeper, more intimate. James told her about his passion for music, about how the piano keys were the only place where he could truly express everything he carried inside. Eleanor shared her dreams of traveling, of seeing the great libraries of the world, of someday writing the stories that lived in her imagination. One July afternoon, when the heat made the air inside the library almost unbearable, James invited her to walk. Eleanor accepted with her heart racing, aware that she was crossing an invisible line that would change everything forever. They walked to the century-old oak in the town square, a place where young couples had gathered since their grandparents were sweethearts. Under the cool shade of its branches, James took Eleanor's hand for the first time, and she felt as if her entire world reorganized around that simple contact. "I've never met anyone like you, Eleanor," he said with an intensity that made her tremble. "With you I can be myself, without pretenses or masks." She wanted to respond, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she let him intertwine his fingers with hers, and in that moment she knew she had fallen hopelessly in love with the green-eyed pianist who had come to revolutionize her ordered and predictable world. The love that bloomed in secret throughout the summer. Eleanor and James lived their romance in the silent spaces between the town's roofs. They met early in the morning, when she opened the library, and he arrived with coffee and croissants he bought at the Morrison's bakery. They lunched together in the small back garden of the library, sharing dreams and fears they had never confessed to anyone else. James played piano for her in the empty church, melodies he composed thinking of her blue eyes and the way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating. Eleanor read him passages from her favorite novels, and he listened with an attention that made her feel like the most interesting woman in the world. But their love bloomed under the shadow of a reality they both tried to ignore. Eleanor's family was strict and conservative. Her father, a respected banker in town, had already made it clear that he expected his daughter to marry someone of her same social position, preferably the son of his business partner, a boring but prosperous young man named Robert Mitchell. Her mother, for her part, viewed any deviation from established norms with suspicion. For her, Eleanor's role was clear: marry well, have children, and keep the family reputation intact. A romance with an itinerant musician, however talented, was not part of her plans. Eleanor knew all this, but when she was with James, the outside world disappeared. He made her feel brave, as if she could defy any expectation and create her own destiny. In his arms, under the oak in the square or in the silent corners of the library, Eleanor allowed herself to dream of a different life. One August night, when the stars shone with an almost magical intensity, James took her to the old bridge that crossed the stream on the outskirts of town. The sound of running water created a natural melody that accompanied their whispers of love. "Eleanor," he said, taking her face in his hands, "there's something I need to tell you." She felt as if her heart was going to burst from her chest. In James's expression there was something new, a mixture of excitement and nervousness she had never seen before. "I've received a letter," he continued, his voice trembling slightly. "I've been accepted at the New York Conservatory. It's the opportunity I've been waiting for my entire life." Eleanor felt as if the world was swaying under her feet. She knew this moment would come someday, but she hadn't prepared for the reality of losing him. "But there's something more," James added quickly, seeing the pallor spreading across Eleanor's face. "I want you to come with me. We can get married, start a new life together in the city. I know it's hasty, but Eleanor ... I love you. I can't imagine my future without you." The words hung suspended in the night air like a promise and a plea at the same time. Eleanor felt her heart split in two. One part screamed yes, that she should run toward adventure and love. The other part, the one that had been molded by years of family expectations and deep-rooted fears, paralyzed her with its weight. The decision that changed everything. Eleanor spent 3 days unable to sleep, tossing in her bed while her mind fought a battle between love and fear. James waited for her answer with a patience that both calmed and tortured her at the same time. The family pressure came unexpectedly. Her mother had noticed the changes in Eleanor, the secret smiles, the lost looks, the way she hummed unknown melodies while doing household chores. One afternoon, while Eleanor organized her thoughts in the back garden of her house, her father approached with that serious expression that always preceded important conversation. "Eleanor, we need to talk about your future," he said without preamble. "Robert Mitchell has formally asked for your hand in marriage. It's a good proposal, an opportunity to establish yourself well." She felt as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown at her. "No, Dad, I can't marry Robert. I don't love him." Her father frowned, clearly surprised by her resistance. "Love is a luxury that few people can afford, Eleanor. Marriage is an alliance, a way to secure your future and maintain our position in the community." "But there's someone else," Eleanor insisted, feeling her courage fade under her father's stern gaze. "Are you referring to that musician who hangs around the library?" His voice loaded with disapproval made Eleanor feel small and ashamed. "Eleanor, that man has no future. Musicians go from town to town. They never settle down. Is that the life you want? Constant uncertainty?" Her father's words pierced her heart like daggers. For the first time, Eleanor allowed herself to really imagine what it would mean to leave with James, leaving behind everything known, facing a world she didn't know, possibly disappointing her family forever. That night, when she met James under the oak in the square, Eleanor carried the weight of all those doubts on her shoulders. He was waiting for her with a rose he had cut from the church garden, and his smile faded when he saw the expression on her face. "James," she began, fighting against the tears that threatened to overflow, "I can't go with you." The words fell between them like an invisible barrier. James looked at her as if he hadn't understood, as if the words made no sense. "What are you saying?" he asked with a hoarse voice. "My family would never forgive me. I don't know if I'm brave enough to start over in an unknown place. I'm scared, James. I'm very scared." He approached and took her hands, and Eleanor could see tears forming in his green eyes. "Eleanor, fear is normal, but true love is worth any risk. We can build something beautiful together." But she had already made her decision, or rather, her fear had decided for her. She shook her head, pulling away from his hands as if his touch was too painful. "I'm sorry, James. I'm so sorry." He looked at her for a long moment, and Eleanor could see how something broke inside him. Without saying another word, he turned and walked into the darkness, taking with him all the dreams they had built together. ***, the letter that never arrived. ***, James left for New York without saying goodbye. Eleanor found out from the church pastor, who casually mentioned that the pianist had ended his contract earlier than expected. What Eleanor didn't know was that, on his last night in Willow Creek, James had written a letter. A desperate letter, full of promises and pleas begging her to wait, to give him a chance to prove that their love could overcome any obstacle. The letter had been left in the library, hidden between the pages of the cookbook that Eleanor frequently consulted to organize community events. James hoped she would find it and give their love one last chance, but fate had other plans. The letter was lost among the pages, forgotten for decades, while Eleanor built a different life, always with an emptiness in her heart that she couldn't fully understand. Eleanor married Robert Mitchell 6 months later, in an elegant ceremony that satisfied both families but felt like a funeral for her. Robert was a good man, responsible and stable, but he could never fill the space James had left in her heart. They had 3 children, Margaret, William, and Sarah. Eleanor dedicated herself to being the perfect wife and mother that was expected of her, but in the quiet moments, when she thought no one was watching, her eyes would lose themselves in the distance, as if she were searching for something or someone she had never stopped missing. Robert died of a heart attack when Eleanor was 55, leaving her alone with her memories and the constant feeling that she had lived someone else's life. Her children grew up and formed their own families, and although they loved her, they never managed to understand the melancholy that sometimes clouded their mother's eyes. The unexpected reunion now, returning to the present, Eleanor held that lost letter between her trembling fingers. For more than 50 years she had lived believing that James had forgotten her easily, that his departure had been a liberation for him. The existence of that letter changed everything. But before she could find the courage to open it, the doorbell interrupted her. Her daughter Margaret appeared at the threshold, loaded with boxes and with that determined smile she used when she wanted to cheer up her mother. "Mom, I have a surprise for you," Margaret announced. "Sarah has decided to have her wedding here in Willow Creek, in the Henderson garden. She says she wants to get married where you grew up, where our family story began." Eleanor felt a mixture of excitement and nostalgia. Sarah was her youngest granddaughter, a free and romantic artist who had always been her secret favorite. The idea of seeing her get married in the place where she herself had lived her great love filled her with strange anticipation. The wedding was held on a Saturday in spring, when the Henderson Gardens were at their maximum splendor. Eleanor arrived early, dressed in an elegant navy blue suit that matched her eyes, still bright despite the years. While greeting the guests and receiving compliments about how beautiful Sarah looked in her wedding dress, Eleanor felt a strange restlessness, as if something important was about to happen. And then she saw him. On the other side of the garden, discreetly leaning on a wooden cane, there was a man with silver hair talking to the pastor. His profile was familiar, painfully familiar. When he turned and his eyes met hers across the crowd, Eleanor felt as if time stopped completely. James Whittaker. 56 years later, there he was. The years had drawn lines on his face and had silvered his hair, but his green eyes remained the same, and when they looked at her, Eleanor was again the 20-year-old who had fallen in love with the church pianist. He walked toward her slowly, each step loaded with the weight of all the decades that separated. The guests continued with their conversation, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding between 2 hearts that had waited a lifetime to meet again. "Eleanor," he said when he was finally in front of her, and his voice, though hoarser, retained that warmth that had made her fall in love so many years ago. "James," she managed to whisper, fighting against the tears that threatened to overflow. For a moment that seemed eternal, they simply looked at each other, absorbing the changes that time had brought to their faces but recognizing the essence that remained intact. "Could we talk?" he asked, pointing toward a quiet corner of the garden, away from the bustle of the celebration. Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice to respond. They walked in silence to a wrought iron bench located under an old oak that painfully reminded them of that other tree under which they had shared their first kiss so many years ago. The words that were never said, They sat with a prudent distance between them, but Eleanor could feel the warmth radiating from James's body, could perceive the subtle aroma of his cologne that evoked memories she had tried to bury for decades. "I never stopped thinking about you," were the first words James pronounced, breaking the silence loaded with emotion. "Not a single day, Eleanor, not one." She closed her eyes, feeling as if those words were both a balm and torture. "I thought about you," she admitted in a whisper. "More than I should have, more than was fair to Robert or my children." James leaned slightly toward her, and Eleanor could see the lines of pain that time had carved around his eyes. "Did he make you happy? Did your husband make you happy?" The question was simple, but the answer was infinitely complex. "Robert was a good man," Eleanor responded carefully. "He gave me a stable life, wonderful children, security. But, her voice broke slightly, but I could never love him the way I loved you. James closed his eyes, as if those words were physically painful. Eleanor, I wrote a letter before leaving. A letter where I begged you to wait for me, to give me a chance to prove that our love could overcome any obstacle. Eleanor felt as if the air had thickened around them. A letter, she repeated, remembering the envelope she had found that morning. James, I found your letter, this morning, among my things. I never received it when you wrote it. He looked at her with an expression of astonishment and pain so intense that Eleanor had to look away. You never received it. His voice was barely a broken whisper. Eleanor, I waited. I waited for months for an answer that never came. I thought you had decided I wasn't worth responding to. The tears Eleanor had been holding back finally overflowed. All this time, she murmured. All this time I believed you had forgotten me, that it had been easy for you to move on. James extended a trembling hand and gently dried the tears from her cheeks. Forgetting you would have been impossible, Eleanor. Even when I married Sarah, even when I had children, a part of my heart always belonged to you. The mention of his wife brought Eleanor back to the present reality. Is your wife here? She asked, looking toward the crowd of guests. James followed her gaze and nodded toward an elegant woman with gray hair who was animatedly conversing with other ladies by the gift table. Yes, she's here. Sarah is a good woman, Eleanor. She has given me a life full of love and companionship. But you are my great love, the one that's never forgotten. Eleanor felt a stab of guilt and pain at the same time. It's strange, isn't it? She said with a sad smile. Here we are, two people who lived complete lives, who loved other people, who raised children and built homes. And yet, after all these years, my heart still races when I see you. The weight of lost years, James took her hand in his, and Eleanor felt the same electricity she had felt the first time he touched her under the oak in the square. Their hands were more wrinkled now, marked by decades of work and life, but the connection remained the same. Have you ever wondered how our life would have been if we had been braver? He asked, intertwining his fingers with hers. Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. There had been nights, especially after Robert died, when she allowed herself to imagine a different life. A life where she had found the courage to follow James, where they had built a home full of music and laughter, where they had grown old together. I think we would have been happy, she finally admitted. Very happy, James nodded, gently squeezing her hand. I think so too, but Eleanor, look at what you built. Your children are wonderful people. Your granddaughter is getting married in the place where we met. Your life had meaning and purpose, but something was always missing, wasn't it? Eleanor murmured, seeing the truth reflected in his eyes. You were always missing, he confirmed without hesitation. The sound of music interrupted their intimate conversation. The ceremony was about to begin, and the guests were heading toward the chairs arranged in front of the improvised altar under a pergola covered with white flowers. We should go back, Eleanor said, but neither of them made the slightest movement to get up. In a few minutes, James responded. I just need to tell you something more. Eleanor looked at him expectantly, her heart beating with the same intensity as when she was 20 years old. Eleanor, if there's something after this life, if there's a chance to meet again, I promise that this time I'll be brave enough for both of us. This time I won't let fear or others' expectations separate us. She felt as if her heart was going to break and heal at the same time. And I promise that this time I'll have the courage to choose love above everything else. They looked at each other for a moment that seemed to contain all the lost years, all the unspoken words, all the dreams they had sacrificed on the altar of prudence and fear. Finally, they got up from the bench. James offered his arm to Eleanor, and together they walked toward the ceremony, knowing it was both an ending and a beginning. The wedding and revelations The ceremony was beautiful. Sarah radiated happiness in her vintage lace dress, and her groom looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world. Eleanor watched the exchange of vows with a mixture of joy and melancholy, remembering her own wedding and wondering how it would have felt to pronounce those promises with the man she truly loved. During the reception, Eleanor and James maintained a respectful distance, each accompanying their respective families, but their eyes constantly sought each other across the room. When James sat at the piano to play a melody as a gift for the newlyweds, Eleanor immediately recognized the song. It was the same one he had composed for her during that distant summer. As his fingers danced over the keys with the same grace as before, James looked directly at her, and Eleanor knew he was playing only just as he had done in the empty church so many years ago. When the song ended, The guests applauded enthusiastically, but Eleanor only had eyes for the man who had managed to keep their love alive through decades of separation. Later, when the party was at its liveliest, Eleanor went to the garden for some fresh air. The night was clear and starry, very similar to that August night when James had proposed they run away together. She wasn't surprised when he appeared beside her, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "I thought you might need this," he said, offering her a glass. Eleanor accepted gratefully, and they toasted silently for all the lost years and for this unexpected moment of reunion. "James, there's something I need to ask you," Eleanor said after a moment. "Did you ever regret leaving?" He considered the question carefully before responding. "I regret losing you, but I don't regret having pursued my dream. Music gave me a rich and full life. I played in some of the best concert halls in the world, composed pieces that are still performed today. But Eleanor ... no applause ever compared to the way you looked at me when I played only." She smiled through the tears that had formed in her eyes. "I'm glad to know you were happy, that you were able to fulfill your dreams." "And you?" he asked. "Were you happy with the life you chose?" Eleanor reflected on the question. "I was ... content, I suppose. I loved my children with all my heart, found joy in small things, built meaningful friendship. But there was always an empty space in my heart, James, a space with your exact shape." The final goodbye ***. The night progressed. They both knew their time together was running out. Families began saying goodbye, and Eleanor saw how James's wife approached discreetly, clearly ready to. "Eleanor, James has talked about you a lot over the years," said Sarah Whitaker with a smile that was genuine but also a little sad. "I'm glad to finally meet you." Eleanor felt uncomfortable for a moment, but the kindness in Sarah's eyes "It's a pleasure to meet you too, Sarah. James was lucky to find you." Sarah nodded and then looked at her husband with understanding. "I'll let you say goodbye properly," she said softly, walking away to give them privacy. Eleanor felt immense gratitude toward that woman who had loved James for so many years and who now gave them the opportunity to close their story appropriately. James took Eleanor's hands one last time. "Eleanor, I want you to know that these minutes with you have been a gift. You've returned a part of me that I thought was lost forever, and you've given me peace, James. All these years I've wondered what would have happened if, and now I know that our love was real, that it meant something beautiful even if we couldn't live it completely." He leaned in and gently kissed her forehead, a tender and definitive gesture. "In another life, Eleanor. In another life, James," she repeated, engraving every line of his beloved face in her memory. They separated slowly, their hands being the last thing to disconnect. Eleanor watched him walk away with Sarah, his cane marking a slow but steady rhythm on the garden path. The epilogue of an eternal love. Back in her empty house, Eleanor finally found the courage to open the letter James had written more than 5 decades. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the yellowed paper, and tears began to fall before she could read the first line. "My dearest Eleanor," the letter began, "if you ever doubt my feelings, you must know that you are my only true love, my reason for being, the melody that lives in my heart. If fate separates us now, I promise I will spend the rest of my life looking for a way to return to you. Wait for me, my love. Time may separate our bodies, but it can never touch what lies between us. Yours forever, James." Eleanor pressed the letter against her chest, closing her eyes as tears ran freely down her cheeks. In a whisper that filled the silence of the room, she pronounced the words that had lived in her heart for more than 50 years. "We missed our chance in this life, James. But our love will live forever in memory." For the first time in decades, Eleanor felt a strange combination of pain and peace. Pain for everything they had lost, but peace knowing that some loves transcend time and circumstances. Her love for James had been real, deep, and eternal, even though they had never had the opportunity to live it completely. She headed toward her bedroom, carrying with her the letter and the memories of a night that had changed everything. Tomorrow she would begin her new life with Margaret, but this night belonged to James and all the years they had lived separated but united by a love that had never died. As she prepared for sleep, Eleanor reflected on the strange turns of fate. If she had found the letter 50 years ago, would she have had the courage to respond? Would her life have been different? The questions had no answers, but they no longer tormented her as, on her nightstand, next to the photograph of her children and grandchildren, she carefully placed James's letter. Not as a symbol of what she had lost, but as a reminder that she had been loved with an intensity and purity that few people experience an entire lifetime. 1 month later, Eleanor had adapted surprisingly well to living with Margaret. Her daughter was attentive without being suffocating, and had respected the space Eleanor needed to process her reunion with James. One rainy afternoon, while they were having tea in Margaret's kitchen, a letter arrived. The envelope was elegant, and the handwriting, though more tremulous than before, was unmistakably familiar. Eleanor opened the letter with hands that no longer trembled from nervousness, but from anticipation. "Dear Eleanor," she read silently, "several weeks have passed since the wedding, but I can't stop thinking about our reunion. Sarah and I have talked a lot about that night, and she has given me her blessing to write you this letter. She understands that some loves are so deep they transcend time and circumstances. I wanted you to know that after seeing you, I've returned to composing for the first time in years. The music that flows from my hands now is full of nostalgia, but also gratitude. Gratitude for having known you, for having loved so deeply, and for having had the opportunity to say goodbye properly. I've written a musical piece that bears your name. It will premiere next month at the conservatory where I studied so many years ago. I would very much like for you to be able to hear it, if not in person, at least in your heart. I'm not seeking to rekindle what cannot be, Eleanor. I just wanted you to know that our love, though brief in time, has been the inspiration of my entire musical life. Every note I've played has carried something of you. With all my affection and respect, James. P.S. Sarah asked me to tell you that any woman capable of inspiring such lasting love must be truly extraordinary. You have her admiration and mine." Eleanor smiled through the tears that had formed in her eyes. Margaret, who had been observing discreetly, approached and put a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Good news, Mom." Eleanor nodded, drying her eyes with the handkerchief she always carried in her pocket. "Yes, dear, the best news possible. The concert from afar. A month later, Eleanor sat in Margaret's living room with a cup of hot tea between her hands, listening to the radio. The announcer had announced they would broadcast the New York Conservatory concert, where a new composition by Maestro James Whittaker would premiere. When the first notes of Eleanor's song began, Eleanor closed her eyes and let the music transport her. It was beautiful, melancholic but hopeful, full of the passion and tenderness that had characterized their youthful love. In every chord she recognized shared moments, the afternoons in the library, the walks under the oak, the promises whispered under the stars. James had captured the essence of their love and turned it into a melody that would live far beyond both of them. When the piece ended, the audience's applause resonated through the radio, but Eleanor barely heard it. She was completely lost in memories and in the beauty of having been loved in such a deep way that it deserved a symphony. Margaret sat next to her, taking her hand. "It was beautiful, Mom." Eleanor nodded, smiling with a serenity she hadn't felt in decades. "Yes, it was. Everything was. The legacy of love. The following months brought a peace Eleanor hadn't expected. She no longer woke up with that feeling of something unfinished, of words not said. Her reunion with James had closed a circle that had been open for more than 50 years. She began writing her memoirs, not with sadness for what she had lost, but with gratitude for having experienced such pure love. Her stories fascinated her grandchildren, especially Sarah, who had married for love and understood the importance of following one's heart. One afternoon, while organizing family photographs, Eleanor found an image from her with Robert. She looked at it for a long moment, and for the first time, she could see the kindness in his eyes without feeling guilty for not having loved him the same intensity she had loved Jim. Robert had been a good husband and a wonderful father. He deserved to be remembered with affection, not as a substitute for another love, but as the companion he had been, the man who had given her a family and a stable life. Eleanor finally understood that the human heart is large enough to contain different types of love, and that she hadn't betrayed Robert by keeping James's memory alive. She had loved both in her own way, at different moments in her life, and both loves had been valid and necessary. The last spring. A year after the reunion, Eleanor received a call she had been expecting without knowing it. Sarah Whittaker, with a trembling but serene voice, informed her that James had passed away peacefully during the night, after a brief illness. Instead of devastation, Eleanor felt a strange tranquility. James had departed knowing they had had their moment of closure, that they had been able to tell each other everything they needed to say. Sarah told her that in his last days, James had talked a lot about Eleanor, about the love that had marked his youth and had inspired his music for decades. "He asked me to tell you," Sarah continued, "that he would be waiting for you in that place where time doesn't exist, where young hearts meet forever." Eleanor thanked Sarah for the call and for having allowed James to be honest about his feelings during all those years. After hanging up, She went to Margaret's garden and sat under the old apple tree that reminded her. She didn't cry for James, because she knew he had lived a full life and had died in peace. Instead, she closed her eyes and listened in her memory to the notes of Eleanor's song, taking her back to those golden days when love seemed capable of conquering any obstacle. The end of the circle. Eleanor lived for years after James's death, years full of serenity and wisdom. She became the confidant of her granddaughters, the keeper of family stories, the grandmother who understood that true love sometimes requires sacrifice, but never really dies. In her last months, when her body began to fail but her mind remained clear, Eleanor often looked out her room's window and smiled, as if she were seeing something others couldn't perceive. One spring morning, Margaret found her sitting in her favorite chair, with an expression of absolute peace on her face. In her hands rested James's letter, the one he had written so many years ago and that she had treasured until the end. The doctors said it had been a peaceful, without pain. Margaret, reviewing her mother's belongings, found a diary in which Eleanor had written her final thoughts. True love isn't measured by how long it lasted, but by the depth of the mark it left. James and I had barely one summer together, but that summer illuminated the rest of my life. I don't regret my decisions, because each one led me to where I needed to be. I was a mother, grandmother, friend. I lived a full and meaningful life. But in my heart I always kept a sacred space for the boy who taught me that love can be eternal, even when it can't be forever. Now that my time here ends, I go toward him without fear, knowing that some loves transcend death and wait for us on the other side of time. Epilogue. The love that transcends ***. At Eleanor's funeral, Margaret read those final words before a crowd of family and friends. Among the attendees was an elegant elderly lady who approached after the ceremony. It was Sarah Whitaker, who had traveled from New York to pay tribute to the woman who had inspired her late husband's great love. "Your mother was an extraordinary woman," she told Margaret with tears in her eyes. "James never stopped loving her, but that didn't diminish the love he had for me." Some people have the capacity to love deeply more than once, in different but equally sincere ways. Margaret nodded, finally understanding the complexity of her mother's heart. Eleanor had loved Robert as the companion he was, had loved her children with maternal fierceness, and had kept alive her love for James as an eternal flame that had illuminated all her other affection. The next day, Margaret found among her mother's belongings a small music box she had never seen before. When she opened it, a familiar melody played. It was Eleanor's song, the piece James had composed in honor of their lost love. At the bottom of the box was a final note, written in Eleanor's trembling handwriting from her last day. "For my granddaughters, true love exists. Sometimes it comes at the perfect moment and lasts a lifetime. Sometimes it comes at the wrong moment and lives eternally in the heart. Both types of love are beautiful, valid, and transformative. Don't be afraid to love deeply, even if it hurts, because at the end of everything, love is the only thing that really matters, the only thing that survives us." And so ended the story of Eleanor Hayes and James Whitaker, two souls who met too young to be brave and too late to start again, but whose love proved that some feelings are so deep they transcend the limitations of time, circumstances, and even death. Their story became family legend, passed down from generation to generation as a reminder that true love, even when it cannot be lived completely, never really dies. It lives in the songs it inspires, in the hearts it touches, and in the eternal hope that, somewhere beyond time, all true loves finally find their perfect moment to flourish. Final reflection. And so we reach the end of a story that teaches us that true love doesn't always follow the path we expect. Sometimes, the most beautiful moments of our lives last barely an instant, but their echo resonates forever in our hearts. Eleanor and James show us that not all loves are destined to be lived completely in this life, but that doesn't make them less real or less valuable. Their story reminds us that we must be brave when love knocks at our door, because missed opportunities can become the most beautiful and most painful ghosts we carry with us. If this story touched something deep in your heart, share it with someone special. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had a love that transcends time? What part of Eleanor and James's story moved you the most? Give it a like if you believe we all deserve a second chance at love, and subscribe for more stories that speak directly to the soul. Because at the end of the day, we all carry within us love stories that deserve to be told, remembered, and celebrated. Until the next story, may love always find its way to you.